King of my heart, be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh.
You're never gonna let me down. 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 You're never
When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on.
Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope and no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested, my life began. Ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was ransomed, faithfully bore. He canceled my debt and he called me his friend. When death was arrested and my life began, oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with all freedom in hand. That's when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. We're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Open Bible Church San Jose Online. Thank you for joining us this Sunday. We have just finished up a series that we have been on for the last 6 weeks, talking about rescue, and as we were heading into the holiday season, the thought came onto my mind, onto my heart, about being grateful and how important it is that we share or show our gratitude with one another. And I know this whole season of life over these last 8 months have been extremely difficult in showing any kind of joy or happiness, just because of all that's going on. And maybe not directly with you, but maybe indirectly with others. You've noticed that life's been really hard and really tough. You know, it is hard to be grateful with everything that's been going on, and it's hard to be grateful when life seems so uncaring and unforgiving. It's even hard to be grateful when there's just so much pain and uncertainty in the world, and I use that term very loosely, because the world really for us is just what we're involved with, and I know we see everything that's out there, and I know we read things, we hear things, but really the things that are closest to us, that's what brings us, I think, the more struggle of just dealing with everyday life. It's hard to be grateful when there's just so much anger and unrest in how people respond to situations and circumstances as well as to one another. And I just want to focus this morning talking about gratitude, being thankful. I have a couple of little side stories that I want to share with you that are kind of similar. But first one goes like this. There's a man who's lost in the woods, and he's telling somebody else after the fact that he's been found, telling somebody else about the story. And he told how frightened he was and how he even had to kneel down and pray. And somebody asked him, well, did God answer your prayer? And he said, oh, no. He said, before God had a chance, a guide came along and showed me the way out. Now, I know that seems pretty petty, but a little more of a funnier one here. This came from Chuck Arruda Sr., sent me a bunch of Irish jokes. And so, Chuck, this one's for you. The story goes that Patty was driving down the street in a sweat because he had an important meeting to get to and he couldn't find a parking spot. So he looked up to heaven and he said, Lord, take pity on me. If you find me a parking place, I will go to Mass every Sunday for the rest of me life and give up me Irish whiskey. Miraculously, a parking place appeared. And Patty looked up again and he said, never mind, God, I just found one. And I think that's a lot of how we can take a look at life sometimes. You know, we pray about something and then when it happens, we just assume it was a natural event and that God couldn't be bothered enough to bring about that answer to prayer. I know we just talked last week about how important it was that we come to God in faith believing. But the whole dynamic of gratitude is found in a story in the Bible in Luke, the 17th chapter. And I just love the analogy of how it relates to where we're at in our world today. You know, we need to celebrate something this season. We do. We really need to have something to celebrate. I promise that we are not going to allow COVID or Democrats or Republicans or politics or anything else to take away our time to celebrate being grateful. What is gratefulness or being grateful? Grateful is an attitude of our hearts, not of our heads. It's an attitude of our heart, not of our heads. It's a product of our worship, and our worship is a product of our gratefulness. So gratefulness is a product of worship, and our worship is a product of gratefulness. We're going to see how they go hand in hand. And then gratefulness is a response to someone else's act of kindness, generosity, thoughtfulness, whatever, something that lifted our spirits, something that blessed us when we needed it the most. In Luke chapter 17, we read where Jesus is on his way towards Jerusalem. And he is about 2 chapters away in the book of Luke from his appointment with the crucifixion and his own death. In verse 11 it says, Luke chapter 17, verse 11, now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. And we know that Samaria is not a place where the Jews wanted to travel through. So what they did is they usually traveled around it. No matter where they were going, no matter what they had as far as to travel with, they always traveled around Samaria, not through it. Just because of the relationship between the Samaritans and the Jews. Samaritans, are half Jew, and they worship God differently than the full-blooded Jews. and there was a lot of animosity, a lot of hatred between the two people groups. And so Jesus is traveling along the border of Samaria and Galilee. And verse 12 says, as he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. And the focus is on these 10 men. And there's a mixture of these men, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, of both Jew and Samaritan. They were a group of 10 men traveling together because they had to. Leprosy is a disease that in some cases can be fatal. In a lot of cases is disabling. And in every case, according to the Jews, is a rite of uncleanness, which did not allow the people who had leprosy to be able to interact with the people who did not. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Leviticus chapter 13, verses 45 and 46 says this: the person with such an infectious disease must wear torn clothes. Let his hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of his face, and cry out, unclean, unclean. As long as he has the infection, he remains unclean. He must live alone. He must live outside the camp. And the person that makes this distinction of whether he is clean or unclean is the priest. And they're going to come into play in just a moment. But these men were basically social outcasts, societal scum, basically. The people wouldn't have anything to do with them. And in fact, they were shunned and shamed in public. But everywhere they had to go, wherever they were coming in any proximity of the people, they had to cry out, unclean, unclean, to warn anybody around them that did not have this disease to stay away from them. People tended to regard leprosy as God's judgment. In other words, they must have done something to deserve this punishment. And so, in the eyes of the non-leprous people, there wasn't much compassion shown towards the people that had leprosy. They believed again that this person brought this suffering upon him or herself. And so when they're out and about, there's no way for them to work. There's no way for them to interact with people or groups. There's no way for them to go anywhere where there might be a group gathered. And so they were constantly in need of things. And so a lot of times when they were out and about, they were asking for alms or for money for the poor. But that was the physical aspect. And one of the things I don't think we really wrap our mind around or completely grasp is the emotional impact that this disease had on these people. This type of impact was probably even greater, more painful than the physical aspect, because it involved the mental, emotional anguish that they carried with them, as well as the physical pain of their disease. They were removed from their families, from their communities. There was no contact whatsoever with their children, their grandchildren, their wives, their husbands. They are immediately, as soon as they're diagnosed, they are immediately removed from any kind of social connection, social contact. His wife wouldn't be allowed to kiss him goodbye, or the husband wouldn't be allowed to kiss her goodbye. They couldn't hug their kids. They couldn't do anything that would involve any kind of contact for fear that the infection could be spread. Those who had leprosy would tend to roam together because they all were dealing with the same issue. So that's why these 10 men were gathered together. And so they would cry out for food. They would cry out for assistance, all from a distance away. And in fact, literally, scripturally, they had to remain at least 6 feet away from anyone that was non-leprous. So that kind of reminds us today of our social distancing and the restrictions that are placed on our social interaction and our social contact as well. So in this account, these 10 men encounter Jesus. And anyone that's done any reading in Scripture knows that when you encounter Jesus with a need, there is a great opportunity for a miracle to occur. But the funny thing is that they didn't cry out, heal us, Jesus. They didn't cry out for Jesus to do something miraculous. They just asked Jesus to show mercy to them, show pity on them. Even though the physical disease was horrible and the social consequences were miserable, the major problem that these men had in encountering anyone, let alone Jesus, was that they were treated as if they were, in effect, a dead man. And so this is what they were dealing with when they were trying to get Jesus' attention. They wanted him to respond to them, and I think in some way acknowledge them as human beings. So if you take a look at leprosy, you could associate it also with another dreaded disease that Scripture talks about, and that is the dreaded disease of sin, and how sin causes us to be an outcast from God, and how sin keeps us from having relationship with our Heavenly Father, and how this sin does lead to death if we don't do something about it. And so the very nature of sin is destructive and corruptible and corrosive in our lives, and it just breaks down our moral character, our integrity. It breaks down the individual's character if we allow sin to go unchecked in our life. In verse 14, Luke goes on to write, and when Jesus saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. This is an interesting verse because Jesus didn't lay hands on them. They didn't touch Jesus. They stayed away at a distance. They cried out to him for his attention. And instead of going over there and touching them, Jesus spoke to them. And he said this. He said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." Again, I said earlier that the priests were one who deemed them unclean. And now Jesus is saying to them, go back to the priest and you will be cleansed. In fact, he really doesn't even say that. He just gives them this charge to go back to the priest. And it says, and as they went, they were cleansed. So when he saw them, and typically the law and the custom of the day, these men were invisible. They were not something to be engaged with. They were to be overlooked. I don't know about you, but whenever I talk to people that are homeless or struggling, they say one of the most dehumanizing things that they ever experience is when people look the other way. When they walk by them or when they're panhandling, asking for money, people don't even look at them. They act as if they're invisible. And so when I try to engage with somebody who's panhandling or anything, I don't give out money, but I will engage with them. I will look them in the eye. I will nod my head. I will say hello to them. I will try to have a conversation if I can with them in passing and just to accept them as part of our society, of our culture, even though they may not be the individual that we would want to strike up a friendship with they still need to be engaged with, to let them know that there's an ounce of humanity in us towards them, to show that we accept them, even though their situation may not be in the best light. So we are charged, I believe, with the responsibility to show human kindness to people, and in turn see how they respond to that. Well, I picture this engagement as they're looking at each other, going, well, why does he want us to go tell the priest, or go see the priest, show ourselves, if we still have leprosy? And they're looking at each other, and they could see, ears missing, noses missing, teeth missing. They can see the deformities in the skin, limbs missing, and they're going, no priest. I'm thinking, no priest is going to declare us clean. If we should, they're just going to confirm the obvious here. And so, but they had enough faith to trust Jesus, and they turned and they began to walk away. And as they started walking to the temple area where they could engage a priest to have him look them over and declare whether or not they're still unclean, or whether or not they've been healed, something's happening. Their body's feeling differently. And as they're walking, they're talking about this kind of in question, they're also looking at each other, and now they're seeing body parts starting to grow back. They're seeing leprous skin turning pink and brown, and they're seeing their friends' bodies becoming healed right before their eyes. And then all of a sudden it's dawning on them that as they're heading towards the priest, that they're being healed as a result of obeying Jesus. Now, it doesn't say whether or not they saw the priest, but I'm going to surmise that they did, because they needed him to sign off on their healing, and there's two reasons for that. The first one is they still couldn't engage with people without the clearance of the priest declaring that they were now clean and that they could go back home. And the second one we'll talk about in just a moment, but the idea of that is I truly believe that as they saw and felt themselves being healed, there was such an ecstatic joy that we can't even understand, that we can't even comprehend, because they have been sequestered from society for so long, and now they can re-engage, and they have their lives back, and they can be once again with their families. They can go back to work. They can do they can go shopping in a crowd, and they can engage with friends and family and loved ones that they hadn't been able to for however long this disease had kept them in check. And so now they were just, their minds were racing, and they were excited. And once they got cleared, I truly believe that that they went back to living their lives. Okay, and so it says here in verse 15 that one of them, when he saw he was healed, he came back, praising God in a loud voice, and he threw himself at Jesus' feet and he thanked him. And I love this little addendum that he put, little asterisk that they put in here when Jesus was telling the story. And he was a Samaritan. Again, we'll come back to that. And he was a Samaritan. And I love that. That's kind of the punchline to this whole story. That's kind of the power to this story. The man who came back and the man who gave thanks to Jesus was a Samaritan. Now, I don't know what the other race of the other people were, but it is truly believed that most of them, if not all of the 9, were Jewish, and thus that's the reason why they went to the priest to be declared clean. And so now this man came back to show his appreciation, And I love the reminder of the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus is using the enemy of the Jews as a positive example of the power of God and the appreciation of God in how people should live their lives. And so here Jesus is saying to a Jew, if you want to live your life the way that pleases God, then you need to live it like these two examples of the Good Samaritan and the one leper. Now, the thing with the Good Samaritan, that was a parable. And that was an illustrated story to prove a point. Well, this situation that is found in our text this morning is an actual event that happened. And the actual event is pointing out the gratitude of a man who really shouldn't have a gratitude towards a Jew, but he did because of what Jesus did for his life. You know, the thing about being ungrateful is I see it all the time. We've been very fortunate as a church to donate millions of dollars back into the community. In fact, millions of dollars of donations all over the world. And we've been extremely blessed and fortunate. But there have been times when I have given things away to organizations and to people groups and have come away feeling frustrated and aggravated because there really was no appreciation for the gift that was given. And made me think about how God must feel sometimes when we forget to thank him, and that's kind of the gist of the story. But the idea of that is people took it for granted. And so one of the greatest joys I have of when we are able to give things away is to give things to those people who appreciate it the most, truly. There's no better feeling than to know that what you're doing, somebody is appreciating. And I think for story's sake, maybe these men were so excited that what they wanted to do was, the first thing I think any one of us would want to do is go see our family. And so they did not even think to show any kind of gratitude for the one who healed them, because they already accepted their gift, so to speak, and now they went back to living their lives. And they went back to their families, they went back to their homes, they went back to life as they knew it before they contracted leprosy. And I truly believe that they stayed healed. But this one man found it in his heart to be so appreciative that he came back to Jesus. In Romans chapter 1, verse 20 through 21, it talks about somebody who is unthankful. It says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what he has made, so that people are without excuse." In other words, God has given us this beautiful creation to show us who he is. Then in verse 21, "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, foolish hearts were darkened." So this lack of gratitude turned into a mental mental struggle for them. And so a lack of godly gratitude corrupted their attitudes, and it affected their mental state. It said their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. And I think that's what happens when people become ungrateful. It affects their mind, it affects their heart in a negative, dark way. So when it comes to life, the critical thinking is whether you take things for granted or you take them with gratitude. You take them for granted or you take it with gratitude. It says, one of them, when he saw that he was healed, he turned back, glorifying God with a loud voice. And just as Jesus saw the lepers whom the others failed to see, this man sees what the other lepers failed to see, that he was healed, that God deserves praise, and that Jesus deserved his thanks. Which side of the story do you see yourself on? Which one of those lepers do you identify yourself with? How many times has God done something in your life only for you to go back to business as usual, go back to life because you've taken for granted what he has done? I've done that before too. I've taken for granted God's blessings and goodness displayed in my life. I think many of us would put ourselves in a position of the casual observer, part of the crowd watching this interaction, when in fact we need to put ourselves in the position of those men who were deemed unclean. How would we react if we were to be given our lives back? Well, this man, he threw himself at Jesus' feet. And I can't help but remember several weeks back, we talked about the woman with the issue of blood and talked about the rescue that she received of her healing. And what did she do? When Jesus asked who touched his garment and he wasn't going to stop until somebody came forward, she knew she was caught. And so she responded by throwing herself at Jesus' feet. What is it about Jesus' feet that these people would cast themselves at? Well, the Maasai tribe in Western Africa has an unusual way of saying thank you. They bow and they put their forehead on the ground in the dirt and they say, "My head is in the dirt." It is a way of expressing a person's humble condition and acknowledging the kindness of the person's act towards them. And then there is another African tribe. They express their gratitude by sitting for a long time in front of the hut of the person who did the favor, who showed the act of graciousness. And they say literally, "I sit on the ground before you." There is something about the nature of gratitude being a humble response to the genuineness of somebody else towards us. This man's position on his face at Jesus' feet also shows the proper attitude of humility that should characterize those who have been healed by his mercy. And again, if we want to associate ourselves as part of that leprous crew because of our sin, then what greater act of thankfulness should we show in gratitude than by bowing at the feet of our master, who they called Jesus their master? We need to do the same. We owe everything to him and can claim nothing as coming from ourselves. This leper wasn't maintaining his dignity and self-esteem. He wasn't claiming Jesus did his part and then I did mine. He knew that he had been healed totally because of Jesus' mercy on him. And he so readily fell on his face at his feet. And this is where we as his redeemed and his saved people, this is where we should camp out, is at the feet of Jesus. Hebrews chapter 13 tells us, chapter 13 verses 15 through 16, "Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that openly profess his name, and do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased." So we not only need to come before Jesus and offer a continuous offering of a sacrifice of praise, but we need to then go and do good to others to show that same act of graciousness to others that was shown to us. And then because this is one of the things that Jesus did. He saved us from the greatest disease of all, which is the disease of sin. And because of this, we need to bring our best praise to him at all times. Jesus asked this question as we look at the last three verses. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner," or this Samaritan? Then he said to him, rise and go, your faith has made you well. Now, the phrase made you well in the Greek is sozo, and the word commonly translated means to save. In other words, he said, your faith has not only made you well healing-wise, but your faith has saved you spirit-wise. You are now saved because of your act of gratitude. Now there were 9 people who did not come back, and I truly believe that they were all healed, but only one, that 10th that came back to Jesus, ended up being saved. Gratitude and faith go hand in hand. Being grateful is a definitive reaction to our salvation. May you never forget or lose sight of what Jesus did to bring us out of darkness into light, to bring us out of sin into healing of that in our lives. You see, gratefulness is an attitude of our hearts, not of our heads. It is a product of our worship, and our worship is a product of our gratefulness. And lastly, it is a response. Gratefulness is a response to someone else's act of kindness, generosity, and thoughtfulness. And the one to whom we need to show our gratitude the most to is the act of God towards our sin by sending his son Jesus to die on our behalf. You see, Jesus was the one, as I've said earlier, the one that destroyed or brought healing to our disease of sin. So let's approach this season with an attitude of gratitude, because that's your choice. You get to choose how you respond during these next few months, these next few holiday celebrations, Thanksgiving and Christmas just right around the corner. And I challenge you to show and demonstrate what it truly means to be grateful. God bless you. And I just want to challenge you this morning. If you're dealing with a lot of stuff and it's hard to be grateful, you're finding it hard to be thankful because it just seems like everything is just coming down around you and you're barely standing on 2 feet. Some of you might even say you're barely hanging on by a thread. I just want to challenge you. If you would text the word prayer to this phone number that's at the bottom of your screen, 408-547-4911, 408-547-4911. Just text the word prayer and your first name, and we would love to pray with you, pray for you as you are just trying to navigate this difficult time, this difficult season with an attitude of thankfulness and gratitude. God bless you. We appreciate you, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great rest of the week.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All of my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am of the good